Oh, good evening and welcome all. Welcome to Chris and his cat.
Hello. Yes, me and the cat. I don't know where Pat is. I know that I think he must have gotten mildly distracted or something briefly, but I talked with him like 10, 15 minutes ago. So
Well, good. Sorry we're late by a few minutes. I was downstairs fulfilling orders, actually catching up on customer service emails from donors. You know, I didn't get my patches or this order's missing or whatever. So, I got Crystal set up. Crystal got home right before her stream, so I got her set up, and then
he's been ignoring me for the last hour.
of course he does. Of course. Yeah. He's a cat. That's what they do.
Pat says he's backstage.
Oh, there he is. Boom. Whoop. There he is. Hey, Pat.
There he is.
Welcome all. Tonight actually broadcast on the Axanar YouTube channel, and good because we got almost 40 watchers there. Hey, if you are on the Axanar channel, YouTube channel, check out the Aries Studios YouTube channel where we do our daily live streams. Now, Axanar Confidential and maybe Starfleet Tactical now will be on the Axanar YouTube channel, but we do daily live streams, nightly live streams on the Aries Studios channel, and that's where Two Geek Girls, which is Crystal and Kelly, which is actually three, but they were okay. They broadcast as well. So anyway, check out the Aries Studios channel as well. Hope you guys. What's new with you guys this week? Anything earth-shaking? Chris, anything earth-shaking in the military-industrial complex? The deep thing that you
nothing earth-shaking work-wise. I did have one. I re-listened to the stream from last week earlier today. I tried to. So that everybody knows, what I try to do is I try to go through and rewatch it at least once and pay attention to the chat while I'm watching it, and then post in the comments section any replies I have to people that go in the chat. So I've done that the last couple of weeks. I'm going to keep on trying to do that to answer any questions. Like last week, I referred to Karl Lautenschlager and the articles that he wrote, so I put links in for that stuff where I had it. Things like that. As I was going through it, why did I go down this path? There was something.
You hold that thought for a second and hold that thought. I want
Roger.
to thank Jeffrey Moon for his $5 super chat. And Jeffrey, I am sending you a free patch. You send me a message, Alec at Axanar.com. Send me a message because you have an X-20 dinosaur as your avatar, which was one of my favorite concepts of all time. Meant to be a suborbital bomber, basically, right? Right?
I don't think we ever specifically talked about using it to deliver a weapon, but there were plenty of other things that we talked about delivering weapons that way.
Yeah, it's totally cool. They launched it on top of a Titan rocket. It was supposed to, of course.
They talked at one point about launching a X-15 on top of a Titan rocket or equivalent.
I did. Oh yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah, I think
it was hey, maybe we can get there really cheap and really fast, and then they did the study and went, no.
That's not going to work the way we want it. Yeah.
Just like the current Boeing Ares rocket was intended to. We're going to take all this old space shuttle hardware with stuff that we know about. We've been engineering it for years. It'll be a piece of cake. We just sort of throw it all together and it'll work great. It's like, yeah, not so much.
That's not good. Yeah, I love what now the X-20 is great. I'm gonna post a link in the comments section, folks. Here, if you want to read about it, it's fascinating. It was a fascinating project.
It is. Your audio is a little muffled, Alec.
Well, let's see if I can.
Just to let you know.
Let me just. I'm gonna. Let's see. My Wi-Fi. Yes.
So while you're
how do I sound there? Sound all right?
Much better.
Much better. Yep.
Can you guys hear me okay? Let's see. I have to
but I had started to say I watched the stream from last week, and one of the things I said was that I I'd had one of those interrupt-driven weeks where I didn't actually cross anything off my to-do list, but I did a bunch of stuff that jumped onto my to-do list this last week and kind of like that again. So,
all right, how's that? My audio sounding better now?
Yeah, sounds great.
Yep.
Good.
All good.
Okay.
ARA Press has a new book coming out. Do they indeed, Jeffrey? Oh,
yeah, those guys are great.
Awesome. I love that. A matter of fact, there's a series. I wish Dale Simpson was here, because Dale told me about a series of books all about that kind of 60s military space, all the different ideas that was, and I think there's a fiction series that he told me about that. So I'll have to follow up with him about that, but all great stuff. So ARA, what's ARA Press? Is it, I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, they're the guys that do a lot. They do books on a lot of the designs that never got made.
Oh, here it is. Here it is, the dinosaur book. Yeah, okay. I am on their website, arapress.com, and they got things about model rockets too. The First 7 Centuries of Rocketry is one book. 18 Rockets and Missiles of World War II is another. The V2 Modelers Painting Guide is a third. So they did great stuff, and it's got here's the I'll just share the image they've got going. So here's the book.
Oh yeah,
Dinosaur. Okay.
Yeah. So it's history, military, and legacy to the X-37B. All right. Very good. Jeffrey, thank you so much for that. We appreciate you enlightening us as you are wont to do there. Thank you. Again, send me an email, alec@axanar.com, and I'll send you something cool. And we can talk about the X20, which I'm gonna buy that book, I think. I love it. Michael Weir sends us a $5 super chat. Some blonde lady came by this week and dropped off a black and white cuddle machine. Michael adopted one of our rescue dogs that we were. It was technically a rehoming. It wasn't really a rescue, but it's what rescues do. Thank you, Michael. I'm glad you. So it was a little black and white Chihuahua. We named him Chico. He's renamed him Pow Pow, but adorable little dog. So anyway, good. Well, thank you. And that was the blonde lady was Crystal. Crystal and her mom drove 14 hours out to Oklahoma, dropped off the dog, and drove 14 hours back in 2 days. So there you go.
That's an impressive amount of driving.
Yeah, that's a lot of driving. I can't do 14 hours anymore, but I guess it helps if you got another driver.
So there you go. All right. So tell us, what are we talking about tonight, Chris? And for those of you who are new, this is Starfleet Tactical. We talk about starship combat. And Chris Weave works for, well, the government. Let's just say he's a government consultant.
Yes.
And we have lots of those on Axanar. We have Paul Osborne also, who works for Homeland Security. Yeah, he's so secret. He's like, when I work for you, you can't tell I'm a volunteer. Just say I'm working in parking, because he's like, he works security. He's like, don't say I'm in security. So I'm like, so he's our senior parking consultant.
This is funny, Alec. Your video has frozen.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, it's been frozen for a while.
Huh? Did we just lose him? Or
He'll be back.
oh no, he's there. Okay.
He dropped out of the room. He'll come back.
Am I working? Is it working now?
Audio, but video.
Is the video? Hold on. How's that?
Still no video.
Really? What the hell's going on? All right. Well, take it away, Chris. Tell them what they won, Don Pardo.
Okay, so we're going to talk. I think we're finally going to have the deflector shields talk tonight. But I was going to start off with a few cleanup tasks from last week. A couple of things that I went and pulled the thread on a little bit more, and I wanted to sort of correct an impression or two. One is when I was talking about the the 1975 U.S. Navy ship reclassification, I said that's when the Tychos, the Ticonderoga class destroyers, became Ticonderoga class cruisers. They were redesignated, but that was actually a little bit later than that. The cruisers were authorized in like 1978, and a year or two as DDGs, guided missile destroyers, and then they became guided missile cruisers shortly afterwards. So I did get the history a tiny little bit wrong, because there were two events that were very, very similar that happened in close proximity, and I thought they were the same event.
And can I just say at this point, if that's something you in the audience were worried about, we have to have a little. You and Mr. Shatner have to have a little talk about what your life is like.
I know it's. I put this in the category of I'm a naval analyst. If I see a Navy, I analyze it, and so if I say something that's not quite correct, then I want to make sure that I correct it. The other thing was something that sort of came out of the chat when we were talking about battleships and battleship development and dreadnoughts versus pre-dreadnoughts and things like that. There's an interesting little thread that follows through there. So pre-dreadnoughts, the thing that really differentiated there's lots of things that differentiated dreadnought from the battleships that came before it. But a dreadnought battleship, one of the fundamental features was that it was an all big gun armament. It used to be that you had a wide variety of guns of different calibers with different rates of fire. That on the older ones, that's sort of how they worked. And the thinking in that was there's some guns that are quick firing guns, or that are called a quick firing gun. There's others that just have a more rapid rate of fire than the big guns. And if you could hit with a big gun, you'd want a big gun because you'll do a lot more damage, but it's actually really hard to hit with a big gun. So maybe the right answer is to have a lot of little guns and just pew them to death, right? So then they came out with the dreadnought and improved fire control, et cetera, and it was all big gun. Then so that's like World War I era. By the time you get to World War II, you've got a lot of small guns on those battleships again. But it's not really going back to where you were before, because first of all, salvo firing, fire control, continuous aim, all the different things that made the fire control better, you still had all that stuff. So even though it looks like, there's a bunch of little guns there and there's a bunch of little guns here, they really operate the ships in much different ways. The other piece of it is all those extra guns they added, they're anti-aircraft, and they're to deal with like small boat threats and stuff like that. They weren't to shoot at other battleships.
Right. Now, and this is where I'm going to make a plug for the online game World of Warships.
Yeah.
Because the more you play that game, it's a great game. And if you haven't played any of the wargaming.net games, there's 10 tiers of ships. You start out at tier 1, which is pathetic, and you work your way up to tier 10, which are all the stuff that they never made. It's the Montana, and it's just really top-notch stuff. And so, hey, sweetie, hello. How you doing? Obligatory, Chris. She's the blonde lady that took the dog to Oklahoma. The great thing. And what you do is you actually, of course, spend a lot of time looking at your ships and learning about the different ships. And what I wound up doing is, as I went through the tiers, I would go to the Wikipedia and learn about the actual ships I was getting in the game. And it was really interesting to learn, it's especially interesting to learn how different countries develop different classes of ships. I was thinking today, I was playing the Königsberg, and the turrets on that ship swing 360, unlike especially in the back. Whereas a lot of times the ships, they only swing maybe 270 degrees because they don't face forward, which means if you're shooting on the right and you want to shoot on the left, you have to, your turret has to go all the way around.
Yeah,
and like that, I was like, wow, I wonder why they did it that way, but the Americans did. So anyway, if you have any interest in naval warfare, I encourage you to check out World of Warships, because it's not only fun, but it's kind of educational. There you go. Back to you, Chris.
And a lot of the stuff with like turret placement and stuff has to do with the armored citadel underneath the turrets and trying to minimize the length of the armored citadel, because you'd much rather have everything compact so that you can protect that area more efficiently, so that you could like put bigger guns on or something like that. That's why you end up with some of those weird interwar designs like the Nelson and the Rodney that just, you look at, they're just goofy looking. But the key to understanding those, and they're goofy in their layout inside too. But the key to understanding those ships is that they were really trying to minimize the armored citadel because they were trying to put a maximum amount of capability on a treaty limited tonnage.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so it was really sort of interesting how that all fit together. So
how does this all apply to starships?
I think some of this applies to starships. If you think about it, Star Trek really has gone for the uniform armament model. You don't see lots of starships that have, 5 different sizes of phaser on them. You'll sometimes see, there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But at least in terms of the sources that aren't Starfleet battles, I don't think that they've done that. And I don't have a good feel for how Starfleet battles handles that. Is there lots of dissimilar armaments, and do you have like 5 different types of phasers on one platform?
No. The game Starfleet Battles standardizes weapons pretty well, so that way you don't have to look up different rules every time you want to shoot the guns on your ship. So in Star Trek, like the old Miranda class has a Type 7 phaser, the old Excelsior class has bigger, more powerful, the Type 8 phaser, the Ambassador class has the Type 9 phaser. Then when you get to Galaxy, you got the more powerful Type 10 phasers. And then I think it's Type 11 once you get into the Sovereign and stuff. So that, there's graduating levels on up.
Type 11s were planetary defense things because but they used them in space because they actually took some planetary defense ones and put them on DS9. I remember reading that.
Yep.
And had all sorts of issues because there wasn't structural members for them to actually connect them to, because the Cardassians don't build stations with sort of a skeleton. It's sort of the skeleton. It's like the equivalent of clinker built, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Where the external shell is really the framework, as opposed to a build a skeleton and then hang shit on it sort of stuff. So as near as I understand it, it's built more like a crab than it's built like a human, or a crab or a lobster, where the bones are on the outside for all practical purposes.
Gotcha. Okay. So there's a variety of armament, and then from there we don't know all the different types of weapons from the Klingon. They never really delineate that. There's different beta canon type sources that people made up some stuff. And then if you look in ships of the Starfleet, they actually do lay out the different models of phasers and stuff, and different models of torpedo launchers, and all the equipment on the starships and the ships of the Starfleet. That's really one of the best done fan starship things.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
It's just fantastic. And we talked about those a little bit last week, and I went and sort of, somebody asked about it in the chat, so I went and pulled the thread and tried to give them enough information that they could track that stuff down. So if you have questions about that, the chat for last week's show has some information on that. So, but I was reading up on deflectors. I went back to the Next Gen Tech Manual, and the more I think about it, the weirder shields get. There are some implications of what they wrote that I'm not sure I understand how it can work, because they talk about it's a gravitic effect. It's a spatial distortion. It talks about how if your point of view was on the incoming phaser blast, it would seem like you moved in a straight line, but the ship moved because it's being gravitationally distorted. But then they talk about EM windows for the sensors to look through. So then they talk about, there's a frequency, and there are certain frequency windows where it will be transparent to the sensors. And last time I checked, gravity doesn't work that way. I mean, it's basically saying like a blue photon can pass right through the gravity field, but a yellow photon is bent. And I don't know what to make of that. I haven't had a chance to talk this over with Andy Presby yet, but I don't know what to make of that. It makes my head hurt. It makes my head hurt.
And what do we typically? I mean, typically we're assuming that shields are some sort of energy force field.
Yeah, and it talks about gravitons and gravimetric and spatial distortion and stuff like that. So it's kind of like tractor beams in their own way.
Patrick, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say all their technology operates also in subspace and stuff like that too, right? So that's a big part of it. And I think maybe when they wrote EM window, maybe they did mean, Andy and I at least have theorized that, just like you have the electromagnetic spectrum with a variety of uses at different parts of the spectrum, subspace spectrum, we theorize maybe works in a similar way with all their, with the high-tech equipment that they have and everything like that. So because everything from their computers is, their computers are FTL on board the ship. Their sensors are FTL. So clearly through subspace, they get a bunch of information immediately, in
terms of subspace coupling explains why when the shield gets hit, why the ship rocks, because otherwise you've got this weird situation where it's like saying if a meteor went through the Earth's gravitational field, it would cause the Earth to shake. Okay, granted the Earth is really big and stuff and the meteor isn't, but I don't think that's how that works. I should go talk to Andy about this and see if he's got any further thoughts on it. But it also sort of reemphasized to me about how many different types of deflectors we've seen in science fiction over the years, how far back they go in science fiction, how different they are.
Because the basic idea for a deflector is that you project a beam in front of the ship that pushes everything out.
I meant like shields.
Okay.
Yeah, about how many different types of shields.
There's a difference between deflectors and shields and tractor beams.
Yeah,
and all different uses of energy.
And occasionally they say deflector shield, and they sort of put them together. And so I think that actually sort of goes to the idea that it's really all different flavors of the same technology. A tractor beam, a deflector shield, or a shield, and a navigational deflector are all really kind of the same thing in their own way. They're just sort of optimized for different uses.
Right.
And then you've got, one of the things that then you've got that whatever they use for jail cells that like flashes, shocks you when you touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I don't.
Which is kind of like it's a force field.
Yeah, but is that the same technology?
I think it probably is, but I don't know for sure. So
remember, so much of this technology is being created by the writers who are not scientists, and hopefully, and back in the '60s, they didn't have science advisors like they do now.
Yeah,
Rick Sternbach and Mike Okuda are just fantastic in their ability to go and make it all work. And as I understand it, Sternbach had a bunch of people on speed dial people who were scientists to help make all that stuff work out. And so he did a really fantastic job of that.
An awful lot of the technology, if you're talking about the shooting and all that kind of stuff, an awful lot of the technology in Star Trek was just based on their limited budget, right? They used transporters because they didn't have models and they couldn't do the special effects for flying shuttles. As someone pointed out here, they used shields so you don't have to damage the shooting model for the on a weekly basis.
Right.
So,
that's a good point.
there's all sorts of real world reasons why the choices they made. We're usually trying to explain it in universe and stuff for fun, but all sorts of real world reasons for a lot of the choices they made. So
yeah. And it's kind of interesting watching, sort of comparing this technology to some of the other ones that we see in various science fiction fields, like the Langston field from Moten God's Eye is something totally different. It absorbs energy, so it doesn't push it away, it doesn't deflect it, it doesn't change the trajectory. It just sort of absorbs kinetic energy, kinetic and electromagnetic energy. Like at the square of the velocity, so the harder you hit it, the more energy it absorbs. Up until the point where it fails.
Couple points here. Mech1164 says in DS9's Trials and Tribulations and in TG's first movies, shields had a frequency, so in between the pulse sensors would work.
Yeah, and that's what they say, but that's not what the tech manual says.
No, that is kind of what the tech manual says.
No, the tech manual. I just read this, and I was reading it like a lawyer. It talks both about frequency stuff, but it talks about particular electromagnetic, it being transparent to particular electromagnetic wavelengths. And so some of it is like the shield is flickering on and off, and if you know exactly how to match up with that, you can go through it. But in other cases, they specifically talk in terms of, well, maybe that works. Maybe that works.
Well, yeah, because that's where Chief O'Brien managed to beam through the old Enterprise's shields in Trials and Tribulations.
Yeah, okay. Let me go back and think about freshman physics a little bit more. Maybe.
This is why. Listen, and there's always what we want to do is as we talk about these things is set forth like, okay, in this universe or this universe, this is how things should work. We're not saying, we're not going to be the canonistas that go into every episode and say, oh, it worked incorrectly in this episode, because listen, there's always like that throughout productions. What we're trying to do is explain to y'all how things, ostensibly work, like in Star Trek. And a good question here is Stephen Thompson says, if shields are up, can a shuttlecraft leave the ship? Now we know that in TNG we come to this I think in TOS when a shuttlecraft left the ship, they depressurized the shuttle bay and the shuttle left. In TNG, we see there's a force field that something can leave through.
Yeah. Yep, I think that's about right. I think that's actually just about how in the older days, TOS era, they probably had to lower the shield before they could put fly something through it. By next generation, what?
Or at least open a window in it.
Yeah, right, exactly. So,
and I think this makes our point.
Yeah,
Gene Roddenberry was asked, "How fast is warp speed?" His answer: fast enough to get to the next scene.
Yeah, I mean, I always want to know how this stuff works because, like I said, I'm a naval analyst. If I see a Navy, I analyze it. I want to know how it works because it has implications for things like, it has an implication for tactics. It has an implication for potentially even for strategy, operations and strategy. And so, that's the sort of thing I'm interested in. Now, when push comes to shove, actually, I defer to Pat when it comes to tactics type things, because Pat's the guy who's played lots and lots of Starfleet battles, and he's the guy who's thought of it in those terms. So when it comes to Star Trek shields and what that means in a battle, Pat's really the guy you should ask about stuff like that.
I'm going to take a second here. Since we have 52 people watching on the Axanar YouTube channel, and what we'd like you to do, not only is subscribe and hit the notifications item on that channel, but go over the Aries Studios channel. We're broadcasting simultaneously on both the Axanar channel and the Aries Studios channel. We want you to go over because we want more people on the Aries Studios channel. That's where we do our nightly live streams. So all week long, if you want to catch up on what's happening on Axanar and Star Trek or just chat, we have great shows there. So here's what we're going to do. Right now, we got 28 people on the Aries Studio channel. For every 10 of you from the Axanar channel who move over to the Aries Studios channel, we're going to give away a set of 12 Axanar patches. I'm sorry, stickers. We got a set of 12 here, and 12, yeah, 12. And Alyssa will give them away. So if you move over, if we get every 10 people move over, we give away a set of stickers. And if we get 50 people on the Aries Studios channel, I will give out a set of patches as well. So there you go. Okay, back to business at hand. So Chris, were you throwing it to Patrick at that point? Did I just steal the ball in midair?
Pat and I had sort of talked about this, and there's I figured that I could talk a little bit about sort of the tech manual stuff and sort of some of the other shields we see in science fiction. Left out a couple, like lensman shields are really sort of planes of force. If you're interested in space opera and you want to know where science fiction space opera came from, you need to go back and read Lensman, because Lensman is to science fiction space opera what Lord of the Rings is to high fantasy. It's really the sort of document that that everybody else copied. The game, GDW's 2300 game Star Cruiser, had something they called screens, which were ablative particles that were suspended in a magnetic field. And so the idea is that if you shot a laser at this thing, the laser would hit all these particles and vaporize them instead of getting through and actually hitting your ship, which is, I think, in a lot of ways, the most unique sort of thing that I saw, that I've seen in science fiction in terms of how to do something that looks like a shield. You can see references to things that look like force field type things in written stuff back in as early as the 1930s. That's when some of the original Lensman stuff was written. And as far as movies go, the earliest I can think of, if you think about it, in the 1953 War of the Worlds, there's something that's very clearly a force field there. Mm-hmm. And off the top of my head, I can't think of a force field that's earlier than that in cinema. I could be totally and completely wrong about that, but that's the earliest one that I can think of.
Yeah, so, I don't know when Forbidden Planet came out, if that was before 56. Yeah, but that was a pretty good show too. If you go back and watch it, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and every now and then they talk about remaking it. At one point, J. Michael Straczynski was interested in remaking it, and that would be fantastic. Yeah, could be interesting. So I noticed there was a question here real quick. Actually, I'll just try to talking the other day about time distance and balance of terror. Asked if I've read any of the speculation about the fact that they said the bird of prey was simple impulse, meaning it was fusion powered and not matter antimatter powered. So the only thing I can say is I thought about it a little bit, and I think they just hadn't thought, like you said, they didn't have that many science advisors and stuff like that. And for the Romulan ship to have done an interstellar voyage on impulse power, would have taken years to get anywhere. And so they probably did have something. And hey, I'll just throw this out. The Romulans power their warp cores a little bit differently than the Federation does. So maybe they weren't able to detect what powered their warp engines, because they did have warp nacelles out on the end of it, right? So or something that looked like warp nacelles. So, anyways, so back to the subject at hand. So about shields. So we kind of talked a little bit about the technical stuff with shields. And actually, I could share my screen if you want me to, if that's okay. All right, let's see here. Pat, are you there?
Did everyone crash? For all of a sudden, my Google Chrome. I thought my Google Chrome crashed.
Okay, I'm Pat. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me, Chris?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we're fine.
Okay, so Pat apparently we lost.
Oh, there he is.
Not sure. I clicked on share screen and everything went dark.
Yeah, I know. That's what happened. You did that, and I got booted out. I'm like, what happened?
That's not how that's supposed to work.
Okay, good. Let's try that again, huh?
All right, let me try this one more time. Okay. So share screen.
Now Pat froze. Oh no, you're
Trying to do the.
I
think
know,
Pat
it's
did
like-
freeze. Yeah, Pat froze again. So Pat, I think we're not going to do that share screen
There'll
stuff.
be tribbles here. We got tribbles. All right.
All right, so I'm going to assume that's not going to work. So I'll just wing it here. This was intended to be kind of a PowerPoint demo.
If you want to send something to me, I'll probably be able to share it.
Okay. All right, let's do that.
You can send it to me over Facebook or email it, however you'd like to.
All right.
By the way, I just saw that Orville has been canceled after season 3.
I saw
Really?
that too. Yeah. And it sounds like it was just because they couldn't fit both the Orville and Hitchhiker's Guide into the same Hulu production facility, so one of them had to go.
Oh, come on. Seth doesn't have more pull? Really?
Well, they moved once, maybe they can move again.
God, that just bums me out. I don't know. Wait, did you send it? How'd you send it?
Email and hang on. Oh, yeah, it's a little bit big. I don't think it's going to work. Let's see.
You can put it. You can upload it to my Google Drive if you want. I'll send you a.
All right.
Like that. Sorry, everyone, for the technical difficulties as we work our way through.
Chris has access to it.
It's a big topic. If we end up talking about the slides next week, I don't think that anybody's going to complain about talking about deflectors and shields and stuff like that for a couple of weeks. Like we haven't even talked about hull plating and what that is.
All right, so what is hull play? Yeah, let's talk about Enterprise, where they didn't want to use shields, so they polarized the hull, which I still have no idea what the fuck that means.
I think now I really wish there was an Enterprise tech manual. I think what's going on there is I think it's the same sort of technology that they then used in the structural integrity fields, which basically increases the intensity of bonds between atoms so it makes them more rigid and less likely to fall apart. Mm-hmm. So I always got the impression that it was something like that, or maybe they're running a force field through the hull, but like you're running a gravity field through the hull. I don't know. It's all weird.
Well, isn't there some technology even right now where they can run some sort of current through metal to make it a little stronger, like you were saying? I mean, that kind of stuff's in its infancy right now, isn't it?
That sounds vaguely familiar. I think that's one of those things that I remember seeing something along those lines on Science News.
Yeah, might just be a DARPA project right now, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Hey, Pat, put your email in the private chat.
Okay.
And I'll just hook you up with my Google Drive, so you can send you PowerPoint.
Let's see. Where?
Oh, by the way, this is a good time while we're working out the technical difficulties here. Let me just first of all thank everyone who's a Patreon donor. Patreon is what keeps Aries Studios open. And if you want to become a member of the Patreon Studios of the Aries Studios Patreon campaign, please go to patreon.com/Aries Studios and sign up. Everything from $2 to $100 a month, whatever. It helps keep the lights on in the studio and the wonderful USS Aries bridge set. It allows us to do this on a nightly basis. And plus, if you go to, and then the other thing is, if you listen, if you're new here, you're an Axanar fan, go to the Aries Studio all the way there at the bottom on the scroll. Go to the Aries Studio store, and there's lots of very cool Axanar swag, patches, pins, stickers, bags, t-shirts, you name it. And every dollar supports Aries Studio. So keep going there. Okay, Pat, I am gonna let's see. Let me share. You keep talking, and I will share the Google Drive with you right now.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see here. So like there were some technical, some various technical bits. Chris touched on that already. The technical manual does go in, and they even throw in some numbers. How many megawatts of output and that sort of thing, and talks about heat dissipation rates for the shields, and then like Chris talked about, basically when you raise your shields, everything has some tactical trade-offs, as someone once told me. So when you raise the shields, obviously you limit the amount of sensor information you can get, because like Chris was talking about, it's got to open up certain little windows. And so you lose some of your sensor capability. And obviously, generally, as a general rule, unless you have Chief O'Brien on board, you can't transport through shields. But he's generally pretty good at figuring out a way around that. So let's see here.
By the way, there is conflicting information. Some people are saying that article saying that the Orville was canceled is fake news. So so stay tuned.
And I'm looking right now actually to try to see if I don't see anything that obviously.
There's nothing on Deadline Hollywood, and I tend to think that Deadline Hollywood is the news source. Certainly the up to the minute news source. And if Hulu had canceled Orville, it would be on Deadline.
Yeah, I don't see anything that's so obvious that it's worth me trying to track it down during the stream. So I will leave that as a special project for tomorrow.
There you go.
So.
There you go.
All right. It's about halfway through the upload.
Okay, sounds good. I'm watching here. As soon as it appears, I will download it.
All right. So there are several examples, obviously in Star Trek. So Star Trek 6, we know that in a battle, damage still seems to leak through the shields a little bit. A good example of that is Star Trek 6, where Enterprise ties the shields up, takes the first couple torpedo hits, but you still have some panels blowing up and some stuff on the bridge. And we even see, as the Enterprise is turning away, there's actually a little gash on the lower side of the saucer where it got hit. So, and then Scotty's down in engineering yelling at him that the shields are taking a pounding. And then when Excelsior shows up, and sometimes we see the shields in a bubble, and sometimes we see the shields are flat, conformal against the hull. So I don't have a good explanation as to a good in-universe explanation as to why that would be. Different ships, different times, maybe they have some slightly different tactical uses. But when the Excelsior gets hit, we see the explosion from the torpedo, and it's along the hull. It's not in a bubble. But as Enterprise takes a few more hits, finally the shields get reduced to nothing. And then they take another torpedo hit, and that one passes right through the ship's hull and breaches the Enterprise's hull. And then it blows up the officers' dining room that they had hosted the Klingons the night before. So now, eventually, Enterprise and Excelsior, they get to they position themselves really well, and Kirk fires a torpedo, hits the unshielded bird of prey, and it dies. a couple torpedo hits and the whole thing blows up. I suspect neither Captain Sulu nor Captain Kirk wanted to waste the opportunity. So they all lobbed a full load of torpedoes at the thing to make sure it was dead. So now the structural integrity fields, Chris had talked about that a little bit. Basically, it's a network of force fields.
I've got your slideshow up here.
Oh, you do? All right.
So and it should be broadcasting right now.
It is.
All right.
So let me just see. No, that's not what you want. You want. All right, just tell me when to go to the next slide.
Okay, just click on down. Go ahead and go to the next one. So obviously, if you see this on the screen, the first thing you're going to say is shields up, and you'll be glad you did once the torpedo comes in. So I'll sort of rush through the first part of it. So we already talked about the technical specifications. Talking about a couple examples of how they're used that we see on screen. And then I'll talk about some tactical stuff with regard to tactics and maneuvering with the shields. So go ahead, next slide. So you can pass through these tech manual ones. We've talked about this stuff. So Star Trek 6, Enterprise gets hit, and next slide. So, and then next slide. So right there, we see the gash in the hull, even though the shields were still up at about 80% here at this point in the show. So, so damage does leak through the shields a little bit. Here's where Excelsior was hit, and the explosion is conformal along the hull. It's not on a bubble. I don't have a good explanation for that one yet. We're still kind of working on that one. And then as Enterprise takes more hits, the shields go down. Enterprise gets a hole blown through it. And then the dining room blows up. And then they finally get their torpedo ready to go. Kirk says fire. And then Enterprise and Excelsior have the bird of prey lined up neatly, and they destroy them. So, but shields are not perfect. Now, structural integrity field. So basically, we don't know really in TOS if they had structural integrity fields. They clearly had some form of inertial dampening and artificial gravity. Otherwise, they all would have been squished against the back end of the bulkhead when they accelerated. I would be willing to bet if they had hull plating in the Enterprise era, they probably had some form of earlier structural integrity field. The tech manual basically says it increased the capacity of the by 125,000%. So just the back of the napkin math means that means the Enterprise could probably pull 3,000 Gs and be just fine. And so that's some pretty impressive magical technology there that they have. All right, next one. And then and this I've got to give credit to Andy for, because the fact Enterprise or the Federation seems to have a big emphasis on shields and having really good shields, because I think that would also allow them to have their policy of don't fire first, right? If you're a modern Navy U.S. destroyer and you don't have any shields or anything like that, and you can't let somebody shoot first at you, or else one missile hit and you're toast. Really good shields gives the Federation captains the ability to take the first punch, and maybe that gives them a little more time to talk their way out of a fight. So I think good shielding forwards their Federation and Starfleet ethics, I think. All right, now we know from TOS and from even some of the movies, especially Nemesis, that they have different shield generators protecting different sides of the ship. Okay, so that means you might hit one shield on one side of the ship, and then you've got to turn away from the enemy so that that shield doesn't get hit again while it's still weak, and that helps prevent damage to your ship. So we saw a good example of that in the land of Troyes, where Spock talks about different shields being knocked down as they go through the battle. Then we get to the shield frequency, as we talked about. And this is where Lursa and B'Etor got the picture in the engineering console of the Enterprise's shield modulation. So they were able to retune all of their weapons to pass through the Enterprise's shields as though they never existed. So here we do see a ship being hit at point blank range, essentially unshielded, and they can still take damage without blowing up from one hit. So
I have a hard time believing. A photon torpedo is a matter antimatter explosion, and you're telling me you can suck that up? Yeah, I'm not.
So what that tells me is the structural integrity fields are really, really good. Also, you've got essentially you've got essentially backup shielding in some way or another. I assume their metallurgy and material technology is way above ours, also, but it's probably got to be reinforced by those structural integrity fields and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right, next. Now, of course, it still resulted in enough damage that eventually the Enterprise had a core breach and got defeated by this little tiny ship, and somehow couldn't muster up enough firepower to punch through the shields at point blank range of the bird of prey. So always had a little problem with that, but could be that they were so badly damaged their phasers weren't firing on full power either. That's the only thing I can think of, because it should have been able to swat that little thing away normally. All right, next slide. So yes, again, they passed right through the shields. Now the other one is the prefix code. Obviously, we all know about that from, and you know that's essentially they came up with hacking, right? They came up with defensive codes to prevent hacking your ship. And they did this back in like 1982. So it was a pretty cool concept, I think, and looking pretty far ahead. But it allowed Enterprise to shoot lower reliance shields, and again, got to fire at point blank range at an unshielded ship, and it didn't blow up or die. So again, I still think their materials and structural integrity fields have to be pretty good. So here we get to maneuvering and how it really matters. The fact that they've got multiple shields that protect different sides means that maneuvering is also really, really important. And it means that starships will maneuver very differently from, you know, fighters dogfighting in World War II, or they'll have different incentives for maneuvering from World War II naval combat or World War I naval surface combat. So, you know, there you've kind of got armor on a side, and if you can prevent it from getting hit again there, it'll probably, if the generators are working, the shields will repower, and you'll be able to, but we do see the Enterprise, go ahead, next slide. We do see the Enterprise take hits in different shields. In this case, this is their dorsal shield. It took some damage. And this is where Picard ordered a, latitude, full longitudinal roll to turn this to turn a different shield towards the enemy ship. So as you take hits on a shield, you'll turn it away from somebody else and help protect your ship. All right, next slide. However, if you look at the shield diagram here on the lower part of the ship, you see that the shield is down, and that results in boarding parties. So Klingons, Jem'Hadar, and Remans all like to do boarding party actions, and from there they could damage ships, capture people. In this case, they were trying to capture people, but presumably they could create some havoc in there too. So next slide. So the goal when you're maneuvering, you have two basic goals with maneuvering then. Hit a weakened enemy shield, and at the same time prevent the enemy from hitting your weak shield. I don't know if you can move this banner here.
Hold on 1 second. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, hold on one second. And I'll take those away.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. I got just a couple minutes more since I know we're getting close to the end of our time.
You want to see this?
Oh, take your time. Everyone wants to see this, so.
Okay.
Whoops. Well, let me get back to where we were.
All right. Okay. So your goal in maneuvering, see in this particular case, we see that the Enterprise has a down starboard shield. but he's kept that away from the Klingon and somehow managed to outmaneuver the Klingon, hit him on a weak shield, fire photon torpedoes and phasers, and of course just wounded him, targeted engines and weapons, and then they can leave. So, but those are kind of your basic goals with the maneuvering and using the different shields on different sides. So, but with that, if someone's got a weakened shield, that can create some incentives. So go ahead and clock through these. So Klingon fires first at the Enterprise, all right, and weakens its shield a little bit on the starboard side. So we'll just kind of go through a very basic and simple example here. So the Enterprise's shields gets damaged, and of course Enterprise returns fire and has done a little bit of damage to the front of the Klingon ship. So now if you're the captain of the Enterprise, what are you going to do? Are you going to turn right, turn left, or go straight? So go straight, we'll just call that the worst move, the worst possible move. But if you turn right, and we're just talking about it in 2 dimensions and stuff for right now, just to keep everything simple. So if you turn right, you'll continue to expose your weak starboard shield to the Klingon, and that might allow the Klingon to continue shooting at it, and maybe you'll take a lot of damage. But if you turn left, you'll expose a fresh aft shield to the Enterprise or to the Klingon ship. And Enterprise has aft phasers. Enterprise has some phasers at the bottom of the engineering hull. You might be able to unmask all of those phasers as the Klingon's approaching you, and you'd be able to fire those while presenting a fresh aft shield to the Klingon. So let's go take a look. So by the same token, the Klingon has similar decisions, and of course, being an aggressive Klingon, what he does is pretty much going to depend on what the Enterprise does. The Klingon, of course, can go straight ahead. He can turn left, maybe present a fresh shield to the Enterprise, follow the Enterprise if it turns left, or it can turn right if the Enterprise turns right. All right, next slide. So here's kind of what that ends up looking like if Enterprise turns right. Likely outcome of the Enterprise turning right, Klingon gets another strike against the weak shield and at close range, and probably suffers some damage. Federation or the Enterprise might be able to fire some phasers and maybe do a little damage to the Klingon, but not that much. So this right-hand turn, if you were in an World War II airplane in a dogfight, that would have been the correct move, but not necessarily here. All right, next slide. Now, let's say the Enterprise decides to turn left. So that allows it to unmask its lower phasers on the bottom side of the hull, okay, and take a pot shot at the Klingon. Now we're not getting into how fast they're going and exactly how far away they are and stuff like that. So all of those details would matter. Just trying to make a simplified example on how having a damaged shield really influences someone's maneuvering. All right, next slide. So now as the Enterprise turns around, Enterprise is able to fire the aft shield or the aft phasers, the lower phasers. Now it can fire the starboard phasers all into the Klingon, further weakening its shields as the Klingon keeps being a good aggressive Klingon and charging straight in. All right, next slide.
So, Pat, you said starboard phasers there. You meant port, though.
I did mean port. You are correct. I've been saying starboard so many other times. I did mean port. So, and what that means is that, so the point is it really does matter, and based on both the evidence from the show and those kind of things. And if you think it through, assuming shields get weakened over time as they take more hits, then it makes sense to always be maneuvering very carefully to present a fresh shield towards the enemy's ship. So that is day one introductory class to Captain Tactical Training. That's all I got.
All right. Well, that's enough. That's pretty damn good. And we have a record 115 people watching. So thank you all for joining us. Starfleet Tactical happens every Saturday night at 10 o'clock. And what you run into is we have naval analyst Chris Weave and what should I say, pilot instructor extraordinaire Pat Doyle, both of whom work for Bu 9, which is the
naval officer. Pat's also a
former naval officer. And so, you still are, okay.
He's a naval reservist.
Yep. Both of them work for Bu 9, which is the little consulting group that consults with David Weber on the Honor Harrington series. And each week we get together and talk about some other aspect of space combat. By the way, once again, I'll mention that those of you watching on the Axanar YouTube channel, if you want to check out the Aries Studios YouTube channel, that's where we basically do all of our live streams, and we do nightly live streams on the Aries Studios channel. Friday night, Axanar Confidential, and Saturday night, Starfleet Tactical appear here on the Axanar channel as well as the Aries Studios channel. So a lot of different places to watch us, but there's different content available. Well, what else? Any final thoughts on shields and deflectors? And I mean, I guess we don't really, as opposed to weapons, which vary a great deal between civilizations and Star Trek. Shielding seems to be somewhat of a constant.
It does. It does.
Yeah, it does seem to be a constant, and there's a lot less discussion about the differences between the various powers in terms of how their shielding works.
Yeah. Now, when we get to the Jem'Hadar, they have weapons that pass right through Federation shields. So that didn't turn out well for the Odyssey. And the other thing is that their transporter technology is good enough. I believe they can beam right through Federation shields if they need to. And I've read this. I don't know if this is an actual canon thing. But I seem to remember from Deep Space Nine, I could be wrong, and someone will correct me, I'm sure, that the Dominion shields prevented the Federation ships from being able to get tractor beam lock-ons onto their ship. So, like I said, I could be wrong. That might be a beta canon sort of thing that someone came up with, but I seem to remember something like that. So.
Yeah. Looking at Pat's illustration there, the one thing I kept thinking was that both the TV show and the games from the TV show are very two-dimensional. And as a result of that, you talk about left and right shields or port and starboard shields, but you don't talk about top and bottom at all.
Well, we did. They do in Nemesis. So those shield diagrams, they had the top and bottom shields there.
Right. There's a little bit of that, but in terms of they did that because they needed to be able to beam through those for the plot. But in terms of like trying to prevent a shield from being damaged, it seems to me that if your starboard shield is damaged, the right answer is to do a roll and present your port side just by rolling in place. You don't have to actually.
Yep, and Picard actually does that in Nemesis. He does that exact thing. Yeah, he does a full axis longitudinal roll to stop presenting the top shield, and now presents the bottom and side.
I did not remember that.
Yeah. No, I was loving that movie when I first, that first battle. I was like, they're finally actually, really, really thinking about stuff.
Yeah, so. I agree with you. The Nemesis, when that Nemesis came out, I was like, okay, this is like a really good space battle. This is kind of like what I want to see.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to go back and rewatch that. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah, most of the board games, of course, like you said, are two-dimensional. The only one is, I think there is one three-dimensional space combat board game out there. So
yeah, there's a couple. It's hard. It's hard to do on a board game. It's
very hard.
So
well, good. Listen, it's. I know even in there are some. I was playing a World War I dogfighting board game, and they literally not only did they have like I don't remember if it was hexes or not, but they literally had the models on telescoping telescoping rods, so you could show. And I thought that was really brilliant. I was like, oh, finally, because I've played I played Battlefleet Gothic, which is a the Warhammer Space Battle game. And it's fun, it's interesting, but it's really naval warfare. It's not space warfare.
Yes.
Right.
It's so two-dimensional.
Yeah.
So but all good. Well, listen, thank you guys for another great show. What are we going to talk about next week?
Well, that's a good question.
Anything present itself in the comments that we say, oh, we need to talk about that?
I can't think of anything. I mean, I haven't had a chance to go through and do a real tight scrub, but nothing jumped out at me.
Well, maybe one thing we could do is break down the Nemesis space battle.
Oh, that could be fun. Yeah,
that might be fun to look at that and see and talk it through and
Well, so Chris, because one of the things they talk about, one of the things they mention in there is that Shinzon's ship has 52 disruptors and 27 torpedo launchers, and I keep thinking to myself, fire control directors on a Tycho, right? Can you actually use all of those weapons accurately? What are the limitations on being able to shoot all of that? And I don't know that we've ever really pulled the thread on that one, because we never see it fire anything that looks like 52 disruptors at somebody at the same time, or even a high percentage of that you'd expect to be in the firing arm. So, so I'm curious what fire control and fire control directors look like in Star Trek.
I want to thank AVG Geek Joe for his $2 super chat, super sticker, whatever, sticker chat, whatever the hell they call it. I don't know. It's a different color. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Dale Simpson, what was the name of that series of books about the militarization of space in the 60s that you told me about? I never got them, and I need to go back and get them, and then we can share. I can share them with everyone here. And by the way, that Orville rumor is appearing more and more to be some fake news. So,
good. I hope it is fake.
Yeah. So there we go. But anyway, okay. So next Saturday night, 10 o'clock, as always. Maybe we'll let's see if I can pull down the video of the Nemesis space battle. Then we can break that down and talk. It's really an enjoyable one. So we can talk about it then. But in the meantime, thank you guys for coming out as always. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to all the new people that were watching tonight. You're really awesome. It's really fantastic. Thank you very much. Oh, Deep Blue is the name of it. And I'll find that and I'll present it next week, and I'll order it as well. So I'll have copies of the books that I can show you guys, and then I'll start reading them maybe even. So, all right. It's a Blue Gemini program. Have you guys watched For All Mankind?
I've watched a couple of episodes of it and didn't get back to it before Apple stopped it being free.
Oh, you know what? I paid for I got a subscription to see the new Tom Hanks movie, right? And so I paid for the subscription so that I could watch the movie. And then I went to try to watch things, and not only do I have to pay the subscription, I still have to pay for each of the shows. So I was like, okay, I'm out. Like, you can have it, I'll pay you on one side or the other, but if I've got to pay you everywhere.
What? So wait, you had to pay for a subscription and then you had to pay for the shows?
Yes. Yeah. On Apple TV. So I'm not sure that seems like a great model. Maybe they charge $2 or $3 extra bucks for the subscription, and then I can watch all the shows when I want to. But I watch so infrequently. Yeah, Greyhound. Greyhound was a great naval combat movie. Really, really fun movie.
Yeah, I really want to watch that. I really do. We talked about it, I've also Jeff Fagan and I were talking about how it's all green screen, like the whole thing. It's like, the ship itself, when you see the actors on the ship, that's real.
Yeah,
but
right.
They weren't pushing little ship models around the ocean, around a big pond, like they did in Midway.
Those books are Blue Gemini by Mike Jenne, Jenne. It's Blue Gemini, blue darker than black, and pale blue. Blue Gemini was the nickname for the Air Force Gemini program.
Ah, okay.
That was, I believe, if I remember correctly, that was associated with the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, which was a military astronaut program that they were basically going to, you could think of it as being a manned spy satellite that had a few problems. One is that it was a little bit of overkill. And the other thing is that having guys constantly moving around, it's like having somebody constantly touching you while you're trying to take a picture with a camera. That doesn't work. Like somebody constantly jostling you. So just having the guys moving around inside the space station would sort of screw up pointing the camera. So they decided that we're not going to do that after all.
I'm checking it out on Amazon right now, and I'm gonna pick it up and I'll share it with you all, and we can talk about it. That's we're talking about space combat. By the way, do you guys ever read Ben Bova's Millennium?
I haven't. I need to go back and reread it. It's been forever. I read it. I think I've read it.
Not John Varley's time travel piece. Millennium is the Kinsman Saga by Ben Bova, which was basically 2 books, I believe.
He later did it as I think they called it the Kinsman Saga.
Right. It was Millennium was the first book, and which I can even show you, since they're 2 of the most prized books in my collection, because it's really good. It's basically about the first person to kill another person in outer space, and what that came to mean. But here is whoa. God,
was it Kinsman and Millennium?
Hey guys, quiet. First edition of Millennium, and then I don't Kinsman. I don't have Kinsman. I got to get that. But this was then they produced this. The Kinsman Saga, which here you can see,
which I think is both of those books put together.
Exactly, that's exactly what it is. And this is the really nice Easton Press edition of the Kinsman Saga, and it's really good because obviously Ben Bova is one of the great science fiction writers, and this is one of his early books, a novel about people and politics in the year 1999.
Far future of 1999.
And but that's a great series of books also. Although I mean it's 2 books, but it's really, really awesome. And if you guys are into that, you should read that and check it out. All right. We are going to take off. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see everyone next week at 10 o'clock. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Patrick. Gentlemen.
All right. I'll see you all later. Thank you.
We'll see everyone else. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, guys. Make sure you subscribe. And make sure you hit the notifications icon so you can find out. And we will be broadcasting Starfleet Tactical on the Axanar channel from now on as well, since it's such a success. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next week.
All right. Cheers.